researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents. I am David, and I am the Malcontent. Welcome to another edition of Malcontentment Happy Hour. Today is Thursday, December 17th, 2020. There is only 11 more years left to the year 2020. And remember, 2020 will be turning 21, so this year of fun will be adding alcohol to the mix come January 1st. God help us all, if that's something that you believe in. I would actually like to introduce our co-host at the moment, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. And Malcontents, there's a way that you could actually help us out right now because we're diving into, I hope, wet concrete and not hard concrete tonight. And I'm hoping y'all can hear Jennifer because we were doing tech check like 10, 15 minutes ago. And I know that it'll take a few seconds for that to get to the real world to see your comments in the chat to make sure you're going like, yeah, we can hear you just fine. Jennifer is here as a guest host tonight, and Jennifer's going to be covering a couple of stories for us. Jennifer, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
So I am a historian, a U.S. historian. I'm finishing up my PhD in U.S. history at the University of Washington right now. I'm also a college instructor for Seattle colleges, and I edit a local history journal. So a whole lot of history stuff.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I know I am looking forward to sharing and hearing about the two stories that you have queued up tonight. I've only seen the video clips, and I've purposely been like, I don't want to see your notes. So we're right. And then we're going to have a conversation on here. So we're really excited to have that. But with that, we're going to go ahead and tee up our first story. And our first story takes us to Cal Anderson Park in Seattle, Washington, where activists have been holding vigil to prevent a police sweep of the unhomed there, now basically going into day 6 of that. And there's a lot going on with that. It's a very dynamic situation. Today, there was a press conference that was held at 4 o'clock because they have also taken over a home that has been abandoned adjacent to Cal Anderson Park, the activists. This home's in a little bit different situation than Red House down on Mississippi down in Portland, in that this home was sold to developers to have condominiums, more higher priced property built there than the small home that's there. So it's a pocket of gentrification that's going on there. During that press conference, it was announced that the temporary restraining order that an unhomed person was trying to get to prevent the sweep in Cal Anderson Park was declined by the federal government. So because this was declined by a federal judge, I should say, the sweep could happen at any time. The way that the laws are set up, because the notification that was put up there said that the sweep would happen at Wednesday at 7:30, and SPD showed up. They had a little bit of a show. You can't even call it a show of force, but they put on a little bit of a show, and then they left and they never returned. And so they have, as I understand it, 7 days from when that notice went up. So your guess is as good as mine as when a sweep could be coming, but we will be out there at Cal Anderson tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. The other thing is we were there yesterday. We streamed for about 5.5 hours. There was a gentleman. We didn't get his name, but we had his permission. And he spoke some really powerful words. And we had multiple requests, both from email and our Twitter, asking, like, can you please segment this clip? It's 9 minutes long. If you didn't see it yesterday, Malcontents, this is worth 9 minutes. And it is not just him talking. There is also highlights from the 5.5 hours of streaming that we did. And with that, I'm going to roll the clip.
What the Parks and Recs Department is doing is clearing out the park so they can clean it. They have done this 4 times over the year, 4 to 5 times over the year, because the Parks and Recs Department employees value their safety, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. Safety and security is number one. Okay, they have a right to safety and security. We got homeless people living here. They don't have a home. They don't have public housing. I would say 65% of these people are displaced and homeless because of COVID-19. They lost their jobs, they lost their homes, they lost their apartments, they lost everything. So they're living in tents. This is not about Black lives. Understand this. This is about HLM, Homeless Lives Matter. Okay? We've been homeless since the 70s. We've been having this issue since the 70s. So what they're going to do.
When you say they, what do you mean? That who do you mean by they? What they're going to do? So who's they?
SPD is going to clear out Cal Anderson to make the Parks and Recs Department employees safe. So the Parks and Recs Department are going to come in and they're going to clean up the litter and the garbage, because some of the homeless, they do heroin, they do meth, they do clear. We don't care about the pot. We care about the other stupid shit. Dirty needles on the ground.
Yep.
All right? That dogs and children can walk on.
Yep.
I'm not cool with that. However, I don't care about the pot. You smoke pot all you want. But I want them to be able to keep their property, their cell phones, their medications that they need. All right? Their paperwork.
Their bedding, their warm bedding, their warm clothes this time of year.
Exactly. I want them to be able to keep all that. I don't want SPD coming in and destroying all this shit, putting it in storage, and nobody has access to their property. Cell phones, medications.
Car keys. There were people, the last sweep they did, they gave them 10 minutes, and I know there were people that were locked out of their cars.
Now, here's the thing that was nice. There was like an alert, and somebody printed the whole thing and posted it.
Yep.
All up and down Broadway.
Yep.
And said, hey, this is what they're going to do tomorrow. This is what they're going to do. Be prepared. This is what they're going to do. No. And everybody got high and drunk and stupid. This is not Black Lives Matter. This is Homeless Lives Matter. We have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. And I hope this gets flamed and broadcast across the fucking nation. President Cheeto Head, you have fucked us. You have ruined us. We have nowhere else to go. Oh, and you're talking about money and jobs. Well, with COVID-19 and the pandemic, where are the jobs? We can't get interviews. We can't get hired. We can't go into work. We are left spare changing just to pay our rent and have food, canned food, ramen. We're not looking for anything fancy. But I'm sorry, America, wake up. This was coming. Now, blessings. It's the holiday season. I'm in gratitude because I just now got public housing. I'm not being selfish. I check on my people. But the rest of you out there in America, wake up. Be blessed. Wear a mask. Get the vaccine. Get the vaccine. Wear a mask. And be safe. Cuddle with your loved ones. Wrap yourself up in a blanket. And appreciate everything around your perimeter in your home. Appreciate it. Be in gratitude. I'm in gratitude. I have a home. They don't. Black lives matter. Homeless lives matter. Transgender lives matter. Gay lives matter. Lesbian lives matter. Student lives matter. Wake up and let's go back to what we were before.
It's powerful. I've been reading your comments as it was going by, and that's why there was a little pause at the end there. It's really powerful stuff. I decided to run that entire clip of what he said because I will never understand how he feels. I will never understand. This is one of the things that I have talked about as the host on here. There are times that we as white people, as allies, just need to shut up and listen. The one thing I do want to qualify, there was a little snicker on my part. It's because the little snicker in there is because he did America. And that's something I do all the time. There were a couple other things where he said there, it was like, I would love to have this guy on the show. He's very malcontented, but he is truly malcontented for very valid reasons. Couple of things that I want to add because he was incredibly spot on a lot of things. The unemployment numbers for the week came out and they are extremely grim. 885,000 new applicants for unemployment. We're seeing numbers now as we're moving into the end of December that we were seeing in April of the year. The economy is absolutely slowing down. Lots because of the closures and all of the lockdowns. There's only one state in the country that's instituted a lockdown, and it's not even for all of its citizens, and that's California. Many states, including our state here in Washington, right, are wrestling with how can they keep businesses open, but at the same time keep the population safe. And we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and Jennifer has a story prepared that dovetails right into that particular issue. But he is right. Where are the jobs? And if Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and I'm going to put them both in the same bucket now because they are talking They claim they are not leaving Washington, D.C. until there's a deal. Donald Trump says he will sign a deal. The other thing that I will add, and I've been saying this, Donald Trump again said today, if they put a $2 trillion deal on the table, he'll sign the $2 trillion deal. Speaker Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, stop playing politics with the American people. The American people need help. In 15 days, because the reason I say it's 15 days is January 4 is that Monday when the courts open. Courts are closed January 1 because of New Year's. They'll be open on January 2nd. There isn't going to be a ton of filing on that. Then you have Saturday and Sunday. So January 4th is really that first day. Millions of Americans who are behind on mortgages and rent will start to fall into this pit of a $2.5 trillion wealth transfer if something meaningful doesn't happen. Mitch, let go of this corporate immunity clause that you want. Nancy, let go that you don't want to put legislation on Trump's desk that he's going to go out with a $2 trillion or $2.5 trillion package. Because you know what's going to happen, Nancy Pelosi? The day that Joe Biden puts his hands on that Bible and is sworn in as president of the United States, and you better believe, Chuds,
These are shut.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
you better believe he's going to be sworn in as president, because that freight train's not stopping. Even Mitch McConnell said it. 1 minute after he's sworn in, the Republican Party is going to care about deficit spending all over again. And the deficit is going to be the fault of the tax and spend Democrats, not from the corrupt administration that we had for 4 years, which has robbed the American people blind. We'll be in Cal Anderson tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. And with that, we're going to roll to our second story. And our second story takes us to Cal Anderson Park again, but it takes us to Cal Anderson Park on September 1st, 2020. On September 1st, 2020, at about 11 a.m., the Seattle Police Department went in and did a sweep of the unhomed in Cal Anderson Park. They also swept out mutual aid, and in sweeping mutual aid out, they swept all of the medical supplies, food, mental health materials like booklets and information like that, and clothing and toiletries, and threw it all in the trash dumpsters. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, an independent journalist caught SPD officers eating the food meant for the homeless and laughing about it in front of the homeless people who were watching their belongings being thrown into garbage trucks. City Parks came in, surrounded the shelter house in fencing, and welded everything shut. On that evening, we came in with our cameras, and Jaguar Security was hired to provide security at Cal Anderson Park. Now, yesterday, Como News' Joel Marino ran a story about that incident and interviewed the president of Jaguar Security, who basically said he's not surprised about the state of what's going on at Cal Anderson, that his people had to leave because they weren't supported by SPD, and that they were threatened with sticks and clubs and poles. Yes, he literally used the word poles. We filmed that day. We filmed the beginning, during, and end. The only time that the camera didn't go is that when it was clear that something was going on, for those of you who know pole cam, I had pole cam at a very low setting, and you actually couldn't see what was going on. So and I even explained in the video, it's like, look, there's something going on. I'm going to have to drop the camera for a second so I can raise the camera up. And that way we can see what's going on. And then there was one other just little dip as I went under trees. So I'm just teeing up this video, but you can see it for yourself. And with that, I'm going to roll the video. Well, it wasn't peaceful here at 11. It was. This was just people helping the unhomed here at 11 o'clock-ish today. Why would you take food from homeless people and then eat it in front of them? Unless you're just cruel to the core. I mean, if you have a kid, would you take ice cream from your kid and then eat the ice cream in front of them simply because you're bigger than them and you can get away with it? Well, let's go see what's going on here. Yeah. So it looked like 3 private security people that just kind of marched through.
I'll keep an eye on your dinner, okay? I'm staying here.
But I don't know what that was about. And it looks like they just kept walking. I don't see them anymore. So, ooh, I want to see what's going on over there. We'll go see them over there. Hey, hey. As a matter of fact, let me do this. I'm going to send the camera up a little higher. For those of you who may be just joining the stream, when I send the camera up higher, what I have to do is I have to point it down at the ground. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it'll make sense shortly. Yeah, there's definitely I'm just getting under the tree. Seattle police has hired private security out here before, and there has been issues with the private security companies. So what we're going to do, the reason I brought up the pole higher, it's safer for everyone when I bring the pole up higher, unless there's power lines around, and then it's not very safe for me. It really is. It's safer for me, it's safer for the police, and it's safer for the protesters. How is it safer for protesters? Up high like this, it obscures faces. And so privacy is better supported. How does this, that's Bella Ciao that's playing. The way that it provides quote unquote protection for the police is it provides a very wide angle, so everything can be seen. If Seattle Police Department actually acted above board most of the time, which of what I've witnessed through my camera is not the case, it would help them build more of a case that, hey, we're operating, in an ethical and fair and legal way. But that hasn't been the case, and we've caught that. And it's ultimately it's safer for me because I get a little bit wide, especially if there's bright lights on and people are trying to blind people on the ground. The higher view generally gets above that, and then I can see better what's going on. So there you go. That's the entire incident before, during, and after with Jaguar Security. Now, I've watched that video over and over and over again, and I freeze framed it, and I've put it on a big screen. The only person that I know of that was carrying a pole there was me, with a camera on top of it. And I couldn't have touched any of those security guards with that pole as far away as I was, no matter how hard I tried. So to the owner of Jaguar Security, it's one thing to come in with a story of how there was these violent actors that scared your security guards to the point that they were ready to pull guns. That is what's in the Joel Marino story. Now, Joel Marino did not say that. The owner of Jaguar Security said that. If that's where Jaguar Security sets the bar for pulling guns, Jaguar Security has no business being in the security business. And with that, we're going to go to our first commercial.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is open for special holiday hours, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday and 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. They have amazing coffee. And once again, I'm going to say, get the potato scones. It's like a scone, and potatoes and cheese had a delicious baby. And with that, we're going to go to our third story. And our third story comes from Seattle. Hey, Jennifer, I'm going to pull you in on this one. I'd love to have a little chat with you about this. And this is also coming from our friends over at Rebellion Baby, who made everybody through the Twitter sphere aware of what's going on. Because of the consent decree, the Seattle Police Department has to put up documentation and get public comment on their policies for use of force. And that documentation has been opened up. Now, the Seattle Police Department hasn't exactly made it super easy to get to that documentation, and they haven't made it super easy to get to the comments. There are multiple documents for multiple policies. There's 8 of them for 8 different policies. Now, I will give them a little bit of credit, because one thing that we don't know is if the consent decree required them to put it in this particular format and to do things this way. But you have to find it up on the Seattle Police Blotter. Then you have to open up 8 different PDF documents. Then you have to scroll to the bottom of each of those PDF documents to get to the SurveyMonkey survey that only has 3 questions. And question number 3 is whether you agree or disagree. And does anybody want to guess what the default option is? Yeah, you know what it is. Jennifer, what do you think about this?
I mean, that's so complicated. I have a hard time believing that there are requirements that make it designed to be that difficult. I think it's more of something that's perhaps put in place to discourage people from taking and going into these things. Because if it's very time consuming, a lot of times, or people that are maybe not tech illiterate don't want to go through and deal with these kinds of things. And so they'll get discouraged or frustrated partway in and then not complete the process. I've seen barriers like this before when you're going in to read like public comments on, say, federal land being put into trust for Indigenous people. So it's a very similar kind of thing. So I know you're willing to give them a little bit of leeway. I'm not quite so sure I'm ready to go that far.
Well, in my professional field and what I do for my day job, so to speak, one of the things that we do is we build websites, we do customer surveys, right? We do this for corporate America. And I will say, because they're just using SurveyMonkey, they're not using any like special voodoo or whatever. And I'm willing to bet that they are just using a City of Seattle SurveyMonkey account, that they didn't go and write a check for their own one. But government can be real inefficient like that. Mm-hmm. But I would think with the budget of 2020 that was north of $375 million, that they could have paid an outside agency $4,000 or $5,000 to have built a much better mousetrap. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true, but they're definitely not going to go out of their way to make it more accessible, is kind of the point I'm getting at here. I mean, if the standard is already kind of inaccessible to people and is going to, I guess, prevent a lot of people from potentially getting through the process and going in and taking the survey and reading the comments, they're not going to do anything to remedy that if it's already complex to begin with.
True. And it's also because of the 8 documents, it's very hard to kind of go, well, which one am I reading here and which one am I not reading here and what am I actually responding to?
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing that jumped out to me, because I did get a chance to skim a couple of the documents today, and the first one I jumped to is kind of their procedures for when they can use of force and what weapons they could use for less lethal. And one of the things I noticed is they redlined out of there that a person had to be certified in the use of those less lethal options, that they had to be trained, but they didn't have to be certified, which to me is a big red flag.
Yes. So what are these less lethal options? Are we talking about like tasers? Things along that line?
Yes.
So there's no, so you have to like take some kind of course but not receive certification or some kind of training. So I wonder what is the rationale for that?
And that I completely agree, because I think a lot of people have the misconception of, well, the taser, you're pointing at somebody, pushing the button, happy success, it just works. And a taser is not that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge red flag. I mean, given that there's already all of these problems with use of force, to kind of, I guess, erase that or knock that out and not allow for that certification, I think is going to cause a lot more, I guess, mistrust where there already is a lot.
And I agree with that. And what we're going to do for you, meaning you, the audience, is tomorrow we're going to have a story up on Malcontent News. We're going to write a story on this. That story may come very late tomorrow because I'm going to be up at Cal Anderson Park at like 6:30 in the morning. So, but there will be a story. When I say tomorrow, it literally may be 11:59 p.m. and 59 seconds. But there will be a story tomorrow, and we will direct link to all 8 of those PDFs, and we will direct link to all of those surveys. Now, here's my ask to you. It's very, very simple to just go, well, I'm going to click on the survey and disagree. Read the documentation and provide some meaningful input. And here's another thing that I would recommend, because in the SurveyMonkey fields, you could do this. I would take a screenshot of your input, because it'll be very curious if everybody were to do that. on how much of that input actually gets to the Seattle Police Department. And I don't mean to sit here and slag out SPD, but the problem is that SPD has an incredible credibility problem with the citizens of Seattle. And I have talked about this before, and I'm going to close with this. If we went back to like literally today, a year ago, December 16th, 2019, December 17th, 2019, the Seattle Police Department basically had the citizens of Seattle eating out of the palm of their hands. We had the Seattle is dying thing. I know that I wrote my piece, Welcome to Gotham, Seattle, back in late 2019. I know where my position was. So why in the span of literally from May 30th to June 8th, did SPD's reputation with this city get completely destroyed? And that's the questions people should be asking, because it's not Antifa's fault, it's not Black Lives Matter fault, and it's not George Floyd protesters' fault. And with that, we're going to go to story number 4. And story number 4 is Jennifer's story. We're going to give her the platform here in just a moment. Anti-mask isn't necessarily freedom. Jennifer, what I'm going to do, you've asked us to prepare some clips for you. I'm going to go ahead and roll that clip, and the floor will be yours.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mossy Rock passed its own ordinance allowing businesses to open their doors.
It's been a rough year in the small city of Mossy Rock. The cancellation of the annual Blueberry Festival, along with Loggers Jubilee in nearby Morton and other Lewis County events, on top of increased COVID restrictions, have pushed some to the breaking point.
Most of us are scared.
Owner Amy Cooper Cravens has owned the Mossy Rock restaurant for nearly 4 years. She weathered the first coronavirus closure, but the second shutdown is taking a major toll.
The city's mayor has taken heat for pushing back against the restrictions. He believes they have other consequences.
We all understand that there is an issue here, but when it comes to shutting down businesses and not looking at all the other parts of it, the domestic violence, the drug abuse, the alcoholism, all of those things, suicide rates, none of that stuff is really being talked about.
Wow. Some interesting times down there in Mossy Rock.
Yeah, definitely. So last weekend, the Associated Press designated right-wing groups, the Washington 3%ers and Patriot Prayer, organized what they called an anti-masking freedom rally in the town of Mossy Rock, Washington, drawing hundreds of unmasked people to the small town in protest of COVID restrictions that are designed to curb the spread of the virus and keep people safe. So Mossy Rock's mayor, Randall Sasser, already garnered attention 3 weeks ago when he passed an ordinance that allowed businesses in the small Lewis County town to remain open. So Mossy Rock likely seemed like an ideal spot for Patriot Prayer founder Joey Gibson and proud member of the Washington 3%ers Eric Rhodes to take a stand. Speaking to the crowd from the small makeshift stage covered with American flags, Gibson and Rhodes declared Mossy Rock free from COVID restrictions and the tyrannical rule of Governor Inslee. They also lamented the unconstitutionality of ongoing health mandates and commended attendees for exercising their freedom. Apparently, that freedom includes getting to keep the rest of us at home longer. So these anti-masking rallies have taken place across the country since CDC recommendations that people wear masks and socially distance to minimize the spread of COVID emerged earlier this year. And even as COVID numbers continue to grow, anti-masking rallies and protests are on the uptick as these right-wing groups like Patriot Prayer, the Washington 3%ers, and even the Free Breathers rail against what they see as violations of their First and 14th Amendment rights. But these are actually really historically flawed arguments. So, the First Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights, which was written by James Madison in 1787, and it's ratified in 1781. But it was added to the Constitution partly to appease anti-federalists who expressed concern that the Constitution granted the federal government too much power. But of course, the First Amendment does really great things like establish freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and the right of the people to peacefully assemble. But somehow anti-maskers have interpreted COVID public health mandates as a violation of the right to free speech, and in some instances, peaceful assembly. So that's kind of really difficult to wrap my head around, because I have a hard time as a historian thinking that James Madison was sitting there writing the Bill of Rights thinking how he might allow future generations of Americans to, reject public health mandates for the greater good so they could preserve their own rights. But anti-maskers, they've deployed similar arguments using the 14th Amendment, which is added to the Constitution, of course, during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War, and in particular attached to that, the COVID public health mandates somehow, especially masks, violate the portion of the 14th Amendment that declare no state deprives citizens of their civil liberties. But this argument has already been hashed out in the U.S. Supreme Court going back to 1905 in Jacobson v. Massachusetts, when Judge Harlan ruled that in the context of public health emergencies, and in this particular instance it was smallpox, states should have the power to enforce measures for the common good. And so this decision was reaffirmed again in 1922, in 44, and a couple times after this, but it served as precedent for the ongoing COVID and justifying these COVID restrictions during the pandemic. So we have this, anti-masking resistance that everybody is talking about, but it's not a new phenomenon. Of course, if we go back to 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic that COVID is always compared to, you see a whole slew of anti-maskers. In fact, San Francisco had its own anti-masking league. And so it was basically predicated on the same anti-masking principles of today, that the science behind masks was flawed, and that masking ordinances violated civil liberties. Anti-maskers often clashed with law enforcement, people wearing masks, and sometimes this ended in violence. And this sounds very familiar to some of the things that are going on today.
It sure does.
So the looming question that comes out of all of this is what these anti-masking freedom rallies and anti-masking movements more broadly tell us about what lays ahead, especially as it pertains to a willingness to get vaccinated by people. So in the last week, we've seen the emergency approval of a COVID vaccine produced by Pfizer, with the likely approval of the Moderna vaccine later this week. And both so far have really promising efficacy rates of about 94%. But they both require that 2 doses, 28 days apart, and then another 14 days to establish that necessary immunity. But given how much of the vaccine is needed and how vaccination is prioritized, coupled with the reductions that were announced for states today, it could be months before it reaches a lot of us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think it's a real valid point that you're making here, Jennifer, that just because the vaccine is here, and we're going to talk about that after this, that doesn't mean we're just ready to throw our masks away.
No, exactly. And this is, and recent polls are suggesting that only like 50% of people are even willing to take the vaccine, which is far lower than what medical professionals and scientists say is needed to establish that herd immunity, which is actually about 75 to 85% of the population being properly vaccinated.
Yeah, exactly. And and the other challenge then you have with that, Jennifer, is up to 50% of America says, I'm not getting the vaccine no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's interesting, after that 1905 Supreme Court case I mentioned earlier, the anti-vaccine movement kind of was spurred by that. And about 3 years later, you actually have full-on anti-vax movements in the United States.
The concept of anti-vaccination is just, I'm going to go into pure editorialization mode here. I'm stunned at how many people in America that seem to have slept through junior high science class, like completely slept through every minute of junior high science class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a long road ahead of us, and it's going to be an even longer road if we continue to have like portions of the population using these really flawed arguments to justify their unwillingness to abide by public health mandates, even when they're, not only for the benefit of them, but for the greater good, the collective good of the people that they're encountering when they're not wearing that mask. So, I mean, even as we see the emergence of this vaccine, which is still a really flawed rollout, we need to be really mindful of continuing to practice the masking, the social distancing, avoiding large gatherings if we ever hope to like resume some semblance of what normalcy is or what the new normal is going to look like.
And is this even anything to do with masks at the end game? Because as we saw in the video clips that you shared with us, there are lots of Trump flags and Gadsden flags and Confederate flags. And the one that I always find ironic when they're mixed in there is the blue line flag that is mixed in with the Confederate flag and the Gadsden flag. Because I can see you grimacing because historically, they're as far apart as you can get, right? When I see like the Gadsden flag or the Confederate flag next to the blue line flag, it like hurts my brain. It's like, these are as far apart in principles as you can get. It really looked more like a political rally for the ultra-right-wing organizations like the Three Percenters and right-wing organizations like Patriot Prayer and very infamous Joey Gibson.
Yes, absolutely. But I think at the end of the day here, we just need to remember that COVID, like most viruses, is non-discriminatory. We can all get it. But if we look at the CDC statistics that have come out recently, BIPOC communities, both the number of hospitalization and deaths, are disproportionately affected by this. And even though science has made tremendous gains since the 1918 pandemic, to which COVID is compared to all of the time, people still have to do their part to curb the spread of the virus, or we're never going to get over this hump. But you're right, at the end of the day, ultimately the anti-masking freedom rallies held in Mossy Rock and other places do far more harm than good. They hasten the spread of the virus, but they just really serve as amplifying spaces for far right-wing groups like Patriot Prayer and the Washington Three Percenters to spread misinformation, stoke fear, and at times instigate conflict. So, there's so many of us that have done our part and abided by the regulations, wear a mask, do the social distancing, don't gather. And I just want to tell these people, wear your mask, put a piece of cloth over your face. I promise you it's not depriving you of your freedom.
There were two things also that jumped out. I got to watch the entire video segments that you sent over for fair use and the way that we produce the show. We're not going to play someone's entire news story. I wouldn't want someone to grab our news story and play it end to end, right? And we're not going to play someone's news story. But one of the things that somebody suggested is that quarantine, shutdowns, business shutdowns and quarantine should be based on zip code, not by state or county. And the first thing that came to my mind was, but then what prevents people from an infected zip code from going to a uninfected zip code? Or what does people who are in an infected zip code going, oh, all the restaurants are open? Like, for instance, where we're at, there's 98033 and 98034. And we had a point over the spring where 98034, where Life Care Center was off the chart. And 98034 was okay. So then what keeps people from just crossing over the lines and spreading COVID?
Nothing, really. I mean, especially having a bunch of asymptomatic carriers, which, a lot of people are asymptomatic carriers. And so if you have these people and you're in this quarantine place and you don't know you have it, but the restaurants over there are open and you've been stuck at home forever, what's going to stop you from going over there if you don't feel symptomatic?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that jumped out at me is the mayor threw out increased suicide rates because of COVID quarantines. And I'm going to get on a soapbox here for a minute because we actually ran the numbers and we put that up on our Twitter about 2 weeks ago. The most recent numbers that are available for suicide in the United States of America, and one thing that we always say when we talk about this topic, and one of the mods or admins in the chat, if you could put the National Suicide Hotline phone number up in the chat as we talk about this. If you are feeling suicidal, if you have suicidal ideation, there is help for you, and you should reach out and get that help. And I want to add that whenever we talk about this because this is a very sensitive topic. And again, if one of the mods or admins can put the phone number to the National Suicide Hotline up in the chat, that would really be appreciated. The numbers that are available out of the CDC go from 2018. There were about 48,500, rough math, suicides in that entire year. We are over 300,000 COVID deaths. If we look at the IHME models, which I will readily admit, I was slagging out the IHME models in April and May as being way too conservative and all over the map. And what's kind of happened now is the IHME models have actually gotten dialed in pretty good. They're kind of sadly hitting the prediction. And the IHME model said that instead of 500,000 dead Americans by April 1, if we ended wearing masks, we would have 650 or 700,000 dead Americans by April 1. Now, I don't have to be a mathematical genius to go 500 to 650 or 700 is 150 to 200,000 people. So you're telling me that COVID isolation is increasing the suicide rate by 400%? No.
Yeah. That entire argument by the mayor, I mean, he's already kind of a controversial figure because he passed the ordinances to keep businesses open, and he's garnered that attention from, resisting the government kind of thing. But to throw out things like suicide and domestic violence and alcoholism and, blame that solely on the COVID restrictions, I think is just really problematic.
And I totally agree with that. That suicide hotline phone number is 1-800-273-8255. If you are feeling suicidal, you have suicidal ideation, if you are feeling hopeless to the point that you are thinking of taking your own life, please, 800-273-8255. Get help. There is help. The way you're feeling today will not be forever. And if you've gotten to a place where you just feel like I have to focus on only getting through to my next minute, then it's time to go ahead and pick up that phone and make the call. And please seek the help that you need. Jennifer, thank you for bringing this story to you. And I think the takeaway here is wear a fucking mask.
Exactly. Wear a fucking mask.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll our next. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to say thank you to our patrons. And then we're going to roll our next commercial. Okay, maybe we're not going to roll that next commercial because I went and hit the wrong button. Ha ha! Because there's so many buttons. But with that, we are going to go ahead and go into our next story. And our next story takes us basically all across the United States of America, and it ties right into the subject that we were just talking about with COVID and vaccinations. And is there anything that the Trump administration touches that they can't, that they don't screw up? Is there anything? Because word has come out from multiple states across the United States today that they've been informed by the Department of Health that they're not going to be getting the planned allocation of the vaccines that they were told that they were going to get. Originally, the word went out and it was basically to all the states, and states were hearing numbers anywhere from a 30% to 50% reduction. The state of Washington is seeing a 40% reduction in the number of doses that we will be receiving in our state through December of 2020. The other thing that has been brought up by experts and hinted at by Birx and Fauci is that there isn't really much of a distribution plan past the end of December. So there are starting to become increasing questions on who's going to get what, where, and when. Now, as the story evolved today, the state of Iowa and their governor's office walked back that they were getting a 30% reduction and said that they were told by the Department of Health that that is incorrect and that they would be getting their allocated doses. The state of Texas then made a similar announcement. Now, you might be going where I was starting to go, which was, so are the states that not voted for Trump, or I should say voted for Biden, are those states getting punished? And the answer to that appears to be no. Because what's happened is Florida has come out and said that their doses are probably going to be cut in half. And of course, Florida has really big problems. And Jennifer, I'm going to pull you into this, right? Because you talked about COVID. So let's bring you into the COVID conversation again. So what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, we're going back to this whole like no distribution plan, not being able to effectively roll out a vaccine and then trusting that people are going to be able to access it, and then take it in a timely fashion, take that, 28-day apart dosage and have access to that. I think you and I were talking a little bit about earlier that like even the vials didn't have like something with the vials not knowing.
Yeah. What some pharmacies and pharmacists and hospitals are reporting is that they were told by Pfizer there would be 5 doses in the vials. And what they're reporting is like, well, there's more than 5 doses in some of the vials, but not all of the vials, which starts raising questions about, and I don't want to like go, oh, I don't want the vaccination, but it does start to raise questions about the manufacturing and the quality control and the distribution plan.
Yeah, I mean, we've never in modern history not rolled out a vaccine this quickly. So I think the last one they were talking about that rolled out this quickly was actually not this quickly. It took 4 years, was like the mumps. So it's been a while. And so for this to get going and get that emergency approval as fast as it did is actually a time where we can use the word unprecedented, and it's true. Well, because I hear that it drives me nuts. I was like, no, you're just not looking far back enough. So it's actually true in this instance. And I think it is going to, because of, the rollout and the way things are looking, and now these massive reductions. And then we have these couple of instances of allergic reactions, these anaphylactic reactions. I think it's going to create further mistrust by the public and, concern about taking the vaccine. And then when you combine it with these people who are, worried about their freedom and putting a mask on, it's just going to be a recipe for disaster.
And you brought up a point that I didn't even consider, which is the Pfizer vaccine needs to be kept at -80. And then once it's defrosted, it has to be used within about 4 or 5 days. So you have people that have got their first dose starting here in Washington State on Tuesday. And that means that 28 days. And what I've read and what I understand is if it's 26 days or if it's 30 days, you're okay. It's not 28 days finish line. But if it's like 31 or 32 days, you just hit the reset button and you're starting all over again. And you've just brought up a question I didn't even think of. What if their next round of doses in January don't show up? Then we're just back to zero.
Exactly. There's so much unknown, just because the way in which this is handled and, the situation we're in and, the rush that there has been to push out this vaccine, that I think it's really legitimate to question whether or not if you go get the vaccine in 28 days or a month, if you're going to have access to the second vaccine. So yeah, there's just so many unknown variables right now that I think could have probably been handled much better, but they weren't. And so here we are.
Well, Jennifer, I'm looking forward to having you monitor this story for us, and maybe we can have you come back and you can give us an update.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, I'm now going to attempt to roll the next commercial.
Autumn come, oh, leaves fall down on me. I have waited so very long, try to speak my mind, but no one knows the language, so I push it to the side. Music has a power greater than words can really express. Songbird, sing a song to me. Let me know where I'm supposed to be. It's such a shame, yeah. Well, I was your TV girl. The EP is called Blue, and my website is classicelishamusic.com.
Classic Elijah, she has a voice of an angel. We were very, very honored to be able to share her concert. We can call it a concert in a socially distanced way at Green Lake Park. when COVID situation was better and the weather was much nicer, although it got pretty cold that night, although it was a beautiful evening. That was back on August 9th. Her album is available on the website that we had listed there. You can actually download a CD with a bonus track. It's also available on Bandcamp and iTunes. It's $15 for the CD. It is $13 for the download on Bandcamp or iTunes. And if you are an iTunes iPhone user, and we see who visits the website, like we don't see like your name who visits, but we know what equipment we use. There's an awful lot of you visiting our website with iPhones, so I know you have iTunes. It's literally a button push if you go and search for her album Blue on there. And it is one of the easiest ways that you can support a BIPOC person, because each purchase you do brings joy to your heart with her wonderful music, and likewise, you put money in her pocket. And with that, hey there, Jennifer. Our social media manager, Sarah, tells me that I need to talk about this a lot more. And so, but before I talk about what we're going to talk about, I do want to say, if you appreciate what our mods and admins are doing tonight, because believe me, moderating comments is a form of self-abuse. You have no idea. But if you really appreciate the work that our mods and admins are doing on the 4 channels that you can watch us on, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and also Twitter technically, and Twitch, this is what you can do, because they're paid in hearts. We're not paid in money. We are paid in hearts and appreciation. And so you can spam those hearts on Periscope, and you can spam those hearts on Twitter and Facebook. If you are on Twitch, you could just maybe in a reply put a big long line of hearts, or say thank you mods and thank you admins, because they sure make our lives a lot easier. And we have been trying to get, and actually looking at the comments tonight, I think the mods and admins are doing an outstanding job. We are really, really trying to get a lot less echo chambery and let in reasonable voices that are having reasonable debate and reasonable discussion. And one of the things that we teed up on there was a patron drive. We are doing a patron drive. Yes, we are on Patreon, and we really don't talk about it a whole lot, although we started talking about it on Monday for the first time. We've partnered up with the Ally League. Ally League has sold out their black box premiere, but you could still get one. And that includes in the fancy box and everything. And you can get one if you become a patron. Now, not everybody who becomes a patron is going to get a $75 premiere box, because I would be broke if we did that. So this is what we're doing. If you sign up to be a patron and you sign up for $5, you get one entry coming in, and we're going to pull it live on the show on January 4 and announce who the winner is. You don't have to watch to find out if you win. If you are already a subscriber in December, a patron in November, in October, November, or December, you're going like, well, wait a minute. You just said you didn't have. We've had it up. It's actually been up since like July. I just never talked about it. And some people started stumbling upon it in October and November. So if you sign up there for each $5 level that you're at, well, then you've already got those raffle tickets. So if you became a patron in November and say it was at $20 a month, well, then you got 4 raffle tickets for November. I say raffle very loosely. You got 4 for December, and you'll have 4 on January 4. So what you can do is you can go to Patreon, patreon.com, the Malcontent, and you can sign up and be a patron up there for as little as $5. It helps keep us independent and ad-free, and it helps us do more, and we want to do a whole lot more. Don't we, Jennifer?
Yes, of course.
Like, have the technology to bring a guest onto the show is people don't know the panic and angst that I was going through starting at about 5:30 this afternoon. And I had told Jennifer, hey, we'll get you on like 7:30, we'll get it all set up, and like I was sending her panicked messages like at about 6:20, like, I need you on now because I have issues. But so far it's going well.
Yes.
And with that shameless plug for Patreon, we're going to go to our next story. We had already talked about, whoops, look at this. I'm having all sorts of button issues all of a sudden. There are so many buttons over here. This is why it's like, I will be so glad when COVID is done and we can actually have an engineer back here in the studio to do all the button pushing. You have no idea. Don't screw up the vaccinations and wear a stupid mask and stay in your stinking zip code. That's my message there. We're going to talk about Forrest McCullough tonight. Forrest McCullough is accused of shooting a 20-year-old black man in Olympia, Washington on December 12th, Saturday. He was attending a combination Trump Stop the Steal / anti-mask protest that was being formed by people on the radical extreme far right. There were almost instantaneous running battles. We covered this on Monday, and this devolved into a shooting at approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The 20-year-old victim has not been named. There is a GoFundMe, and that's how we know that they're 20 years old and we know that they're black. The other thing that we know is they do expect to fully recover, but they required surgery and they did have a very serious gunshot wound. Jennifer, I'm going to pull you up on the split screen again here as I kind of talk about this. We've done some research on Forrest, and what we found out was, because one of the things that mystified me when I looked at his Facebook page when we were identifying the shooter, you look at his Facebook page, I don't know if you've looked at it, he looks like the guy next door. I mean, there was absolutely nothing on there to indicate that there was anything radicalized. But when you peeled the onion out a little bit, it turns out that he has been on an 8-year journey of radicalization. And that started over 4 years ago when he went back to Roosevelt High School at 22 years old and spoke to people, I believe, in a journalism class on why he was a Trump supporter, much to the surprise of the students at Roosevelt High School, which are a lot of BIPOC students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of the students staged a walkout, and Forrest was not happy about this, and he articulated that. He then wrote a couple of editorial pieces and news pieces, some of them going back to when he was in high school and some of them after, and the ones after that kind of was showing this path of radicalization. And then he was interviewed in 2016 at a anti-Clinton protest in Linden, Washington, which had descended into violence back then. And NPR ran this story that said, and we've talked about this on the show, that a growing list of people who are counterterrorism experts, domestic terrorism experts, military experts, insurgent experts, they're all starting to say in one voice that we are on a very dangerous path in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This whole kind of like radicalization and this, rise in white supremacist terrorist groups. I mean, it has historical roots. And if you go back to the 19th century and you think about the nativist movement, and these people who were really concerned about, we're getting towards these tensions and we're headed towards the Civil War, but we're also having this influx of immigrants and other people coming to the US, and they're feeling entitled to the land and the space that they're in. And out of this comes these nativist movements. These kinds of things are rooted in those kinds of ideologies that go back further, because there's this whole sense of entitlement that unfortunately a lot of white men feel about, this place we call the United States and their role in it.
It's interesting. I know you're a big student of history, and that's why I wanted to pull you into this, and I'm going to defer to you. But if we look at, say, Germany as a proxy, and we look at Germany from 1929 through 1945, of course, we never want to get to a place of where Germany ended up in 1945 in a nation. But if we look at that path and we look at the rise of the Nazi Party there, one of the things was they bought newspapers. So they created their own echo chambers. They had radio stations, newspapers, rallies. And if you weren't kind of a card-carrying, literally, member of the party, then you weren't in these events. And they then have their own little echo chamber where they just feed off of each other on the messages of superiority, of hatred, of militarization. And if we look at the modern parable, and I'd like to get your take on this, look what's kind of happened in the 2020 election. Well, okay, you're saying that Trump lost, so we're going to take our balls and we're going to go over to Parler because I don't want to hear it anymore on Twitter. I'm not going to watch Fox News anymore. I'm going to watch Newsmax and OWN. Oh, wait a minute. Newsmax, when the Electoral College, right? Because Newsmax said when the Electoral College did their thing, look, it's over. And I can't believe that I'm going to sit here and defend Newsmax for a minute. I've actually read Newsmax off and on because I've gone to that source to go like, so what's the other side think about this for like 20 years? Christopher Ruddy, he's a total chud.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
However, I don't think that he hates America or wants to see the destruction of America. And I think he reached this place where it's like, well, I'm in with Mitch, right? And I'm in with Bob Barr because we know Bob Barr essentially got fired for going like, there's nothing here. So what's your view on this and this danger of they're really crawling into their own little echo chamber now?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too, and I mean, you saw this even in Germany, people who were ostracized from other things, being a card-carrying member of something where you feel like you're an elite part of something that other people are not, is extremely appealing. So I think a lot of what happens with this radicalization is they create these spaces for themselves where they feel like they're, you know, maybe an elite part of something or have some kind of knowledge that other people don't possess, and they've become part of this thing, and it somehow like continues to just feed into itself. And so I can't justify it. Like, I have a hard time trying to rationale any of it, but I feel a lot of it has to do with this just feeling like you're a part of something. And a lot of people, if you look at, you know, the people that are in these right-wing terrorist organizations, groups, or on that pathway, a lot of them are people that were ostracized at one point or maybe felt like they didn't belong, and this has given them a space to feel like they matter.
Where do you think internet comments play into this? We see comments in our feeds all the time, particularly when we're doing live feed. Like tomorrow, there'll be comments up like this tomorrow when we're for a Cal Anderson, especially if there's a police sweep. People will be putting comments in. They should use live ammo. One tank would solve this problem. I could come in with my steamroller and an AK-47 and clean this up in 15 minutes. And occasionally we get death threats. And you know, does somebody like Forrest digest these comments and then internalize it, and then it leads into disaster? Or do you think that there's something bigger or smaller that's happening?
I wish I understood psychology better and could really weigh in on this. I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, it's hard for me to even fathom, but I do think they are maybe potentially susceptible to internalizing those comments. And then maybe they fester in there and it starts to feed with that ideology that they're already kind of got going on. So I wish I had more answers, but I don't.
I think the warning that people that are on the sidelines watching this should follow, as someone of the Jewish faith and somebody who has looked into the Holocaust extensively, because I think that's very important as part of the faith. And I always say, and qualify that I'm a terrible Jew. I eat bacon and all that other stuff. We have a menorah, but we also have a Christmas tree, right? I'm a terrible Jew. I will flat out say that. I think a lot of people, though, think that the final solution, the extermination of the Jews, started in 1933, and that isn't true. The original plan that the Nazi Party had is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the Balkans, and they largely took the Balkans peacefully, and we're going to kind of create our own little country down there and send all the Jews there. And then when they invaded France, and France collapsed in a matter of 6 weeks, they're like, well, we have Madagascar now, so we'll just send them all to Madagascar. And then they invaded Russia, and then the plan was, well, we'll just send them all out to Siberia, because I guess Stalin doesn't have a bad idea about sending people you don't like out there to Siberia. And then they got stopped cold, they started losing the war, and it wasn't until the winter of 1940 going into 1941 where the final solution was really being architected.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too to think about like the kind of things they had going on there. I mean, the final solution they already had these kind of, I guess, institutions in place to put people, even Germans, they saw as drains on the German state that didn't fit in with that whole kind of like Aryan perfection that they wanted. This included disabled people, all kinds of different people, the Roma population, lots of different people were included in that whole thing. But yeah, it's difficult. It was difficult to talk about. It was difficult to teach about. So it's definitely, there are some very valuable lessons that come from that. And so I wish people would pay more attention to the longer trajectory of the Holocaust than rather just these end moments of liberation. Yeah, it's kind of my commentary on that at the moment.
And I think the concern that I have is how many other Forrest Malakas and Chris Gunslers and Stephen Kurtz and Kyle Rittenhouse are out there, and just looking for that last little push.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And on that heavy topic, we're going to roll to our next spot. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press, and to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. We love that we got approved for Google News also. I saw that comment go by. We're going to go ahead and roll story number 7, and this is a story that Jennifer is bringing us out of the sports world in Cleveland, Ohio. Jennifer, pretty fascinating story actually coming out of Ohio and the decisions that the Cleveland Indians made this week. And with that, take it away.
So maybe I can pull you in a little bit on this time, just so I don't get devolved in kind of like this historical rant, because this is my area.
Yeah. Do you want me to roll your clip first?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we're gonna roll your clip, and then you can roll.
For more than 20 years, Native Americans and other activists have protested outside the ballpark on opening day. The buck-toothed, red-faced Chief Wahoo viewed as wildly racist.
Cleveland's Major League Baseball team says it took the name Indians in 1915 as a tribute to a Native American player. But now, after years of protests, that name will be dropped, according to the New York Times. And in a statement to CBS News, the team did not dispute that report.
I don't see any reason why they should change it from the Indians. I don't see the Indian name being derogatory.
You got 3 people protesting. Big deal. Go try. It's a caricature. Get over it. Get up. You think every Irish person rags on a Notre Dame logo? You're a jerk. Don't tell me to shove up. Who the fuck are you, loser? You're a fucking loser.
If the Redskins did it, it couldn't hurt the Indians. You know, and then it's just a sports team. We still know they Cleveland.
We're never trying to be disrespectful. And I still feel that way. But I don't think that's a good enough answer today.
Jennifer, it's always fascinating to me when people descended to like the comments of like, you're a fucking loser, when they know that They just have no moral ground or argument whatsoever to stand upon.
Hey, it's just a caricature. I mean, like, why are you offended? God, it's like infuriating. So, it was the end of the 2018 season that, the Cleveland baseball team abandoned Chief Wahoo as their mascot, even though they continue to sell Chief Wahoo merchandise. And as I found out today, will actually continue to sell Chief Wahoo merchandise even after abandoning the Indian portion of the Cleveland Indians name, which I think is, a little bit repulsive. So, they made this decision within the last week to drop the latter part of the Cleveland baseball team name, the Indians, at the conclusion of the 2021 season. And, this again comes about 2 years after deciding to abandon their longtime mascot, which apparently some have argued is supposed to be an homage to Native people, but I don't know how you look at that. This really characterized mascot as an homage, but that's their argument. And so it's been criticized, these, kind of sports mascots, like the Washington team's previous mascot, the Redskins, Chief Wahoo, and a couple others by Indigenous people as harmful. And so this decision to change the Cleveland name has been met with, of course, enthusiasm by Indigenous supporters who have been striving towards getting these names changed. Some of these names, at least, is kind of a nuanced argument because there are other teams that are actually well supported, like the Florida Seminoles and to a degree the Chicago Blackhawks. But I think the most interesting thing about those two names is they're applied to, you have the Seminole Nation or, Blackhawk, who's a very prominent historical Indigenous figure, whereas, the Braves or the Redskins or the Indians are very homogenizing, very derogatory mascots. So before I devolve further into a rant and start talking about white men playing Indian, maybe we should talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. I did see some comments that Terry Francona got a little defensive over this. I'm going to expose myself now as a lifetime Red Sox fan. Nobody should hold that against me because I grew up outside of the Boston area. And I'm pretty sure they put something in the water there. If you want your Q conspiracy theory, somebody needs to be testing the water in Massachusetts for what they put in there to make people who maybe don't even identify as sports fans into sports fans there. But, my understanding was Terry, who I believe was the coach of the Indians at that time, had some real heartburn over this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of people actually, I was reading some of like the tweets about it, and you actually had some people who were, and it's predominantly white men of a particular age demographic who are really, really, for some reason, attached to these names, lamenting the loss of this as some kind of PC thing, or, it's just a name, why are people offended? Or it's supposed to be respectful, and, why are people offended if it's, meant to be, a respectful thing. Even when people that it's supposed to be reflective of, Indigenous peoples, are telling them explicitly, no, this is not, this is very damaging to us. Their counter argument is always, no, it's meant out of respect. That was the thing that happened with Dan Snyder for the longest time before he finally, gave in and dropped the Redskin portion. And now it's just the Washington football team. But for the longest time, he was like, no, I'm not changing the name. I don't care. I've talked to this group and they think it's fine. And, so it's very much kind of in that same vein. So yeah, I think there's, Philip Yenyo, he's the executive director of the Cleveland-based American Indian Movement of Ohio. He's got some enthusiasm, and optimism now that maybe some other teams are going to follow suit. But, this whole kind of reading today that they're going to continue to keep the Chief Wahoo merchandise and continue to sell it. I don't know, that feels a little bit slimy to me, to put it mildly.
It doesn't feel like they're really crossing the line.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like they're making that massive of a change if they're going to continue to, produce and sell that merchandise.
One of the arguments I've heard from people who are against these changes, against what's happened with the Washington dropping the Redskins name and are upset over what's happening with Cleveland, they point to the Chicago Blackhawks and they point to the Seattle Seahawks. What makes their use of indigenous iconography and names different from the Braves or the Redskins or the Seminoles, or I guess the Seminoles kind of fall into that same category, the earlier three I talked about, or the formerly known Washington Redskins?
So again, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, is the things, the terms, like Redskins, Indians, and even the Braves are really kind of both negative in many contexts, especially Redskins, but also homogenizing. So it's applicable to like all Native peoples. Whereas, the Chicago Blackhawks, I've heard from speaking with some Indigenous people talking about the Blackhawks, that, it's celebrating a particular very important historical figure. Same, the Seminoles are very supportive of the Florida Seminoles, the Seminole Nation, because, it's supporting, and explicitly about their nation. So there are these very different, there's no universal opinion across Indigenous people. They're not homogenous. There's very different opinions, very different ways of thinking about different things. But I know from talking to, like I said, some Indigenous people, that there are different feelings about these mascots and these teams that are celebrating certain, aspects or historical figures versus these kind of like homogenizing caricatures.
Well, I know that when the Seattle Seahawks did the redesign of their logo, they worked with indigenous people, indigenous tribes in the Pacific Northwest specifically to make sure that they weren't creating something that was fake, westernized, anglicized, and was an homage and appropriate to the natives people that live in our region.
Yeah, Coast Salish peoples, yeah. They really did do that. And I think, Seattle, I could go on for hours about the complex history of Seattle and Native peoples and all of the erasure and strange things that have happened here that are highly problematic, but I will not. But yeah, there was this they actually coordinated with Indigenous artists to try and get that right, which was, I think, a good move on their part, considering that Seattle has so much rich Indigenous history that is often either ignored or, relegated to the distant past. So yeah, I think in that respect, that was a positive move.
And I agree with that. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was fantastic. I think we'd like to have you back again. I've seen some of the comments going by tonight, and I think other people have already been saying they would like to see you come back again.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, Malcontent. I know that we're kind of bumping up on the 9:30 hour, and I know I keep saying we try to keep this to an hour, and we're almost or about 30 minutes over. I think we're kind of to the point that we're going to wrap things up for the evening. And with that, I thank you for watching. If you saw me look down at my phone, it's because my phone is blowing up. And so I haven't seen anything in the comments, but I've had some people in the news community and also kind of related to things that are going on in Cal Anderson, and my phone's blowing up. I'm not saying there's anything going on at Cal Anderson. I'm not saying that. But I need to kind of jump on that to find out what is going on and why people are trying to reach out to me. And with that, I think we're going to call it a wrap. So we will be broadcasting live tomorrow, probably from Cal Anderson. If we get there and there's nothing going on, then I'm going to get a socially distanced coffee somewhere and come back. We're going to provide those links that we had talked about so that you can read and comment on the Seattle Police use of force documents. And the other thing we're hoping to get out tomorrow, but again, because of what's going on at Cal Anderson, that may create some time restrictions on us. But on that research that we've done on how Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and poor are much more likely to be accused of child abuse when showing up in a hospital versus people who are white, or even if they are BIPOC versus people who are wealthy. And with that, Malcontents, be good to each other, wear a mask. Malcontent and Jennifer out.
fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Fuck you. You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.